Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. William stood before the bathroom mirror, studying his reflection with an intensity that suggested he was searching for something. Perhaps courage, perhaps control. He forced himself to adopt a composed expression, though it felt brittle, like a mask that might crack at any moment. This was going to be a challenge. Resting his hands on the edge of the sink, he let his eyes drift downward to the porcelain basin. The faint grime encircling the drain caught his attention, as did the dull, tarnished sheen of the once polished chrome fixtures. Their diminished luster seemed an apt metaphor for how he felt. Drawing in a deep breath, he strained to hear the heavy footfalls he expected in the hallway, followed by the inevitable slam of the front door. Instead, there was only silence. Lingering in the bathroom any longer would raise suspicion, and avoidance wasn't an option. Exhaling reluctantly, he gathered himself, cast one final glance at the mirror, and decided that his current facade would have to do. The hardest part still awaited him. With a slow, deliberate exhale, William turned the bathroom door handle and pushed it open. The hinges gave a faint creak, and the muffled voices from the nearby bedroom ceased abruptly. He stepped into the hallway, walking its length with measured strides, descended the stairs, and entered the kitchen. Making a deliberate amount of noise, he set about retrieving two mugs from the cupboard. One was plain and white, the one he used daily. The other was Aurora's favorite, a rustic clay mug she always chose. As the coffee maker began to hum softly, he prepared the hazelnut butter and milk, ensuring everything was ready. Whatever happened, this wouldn't take long. His preparations extended beyond coffee. He placed a discreet phone call just in case, and opened a document on his tablet, leaving it ready in the living room. Returning to the kitchen, he perched on a stool by the bar, sipping his coffee as he waited. The wait wasn't long. Aurora appeared in the doorway, her new blouse framing a neckline she seemed eager to showcase. She wore a pair of freshly purchased blue jeans, snug and form-fitting, accentuating her toned figure. Usually seen with contact lenses, today she wore glasses, pushing a dyed blonde strand of hair behind her ear as she met William's gaze. Her expression was a mixture of hesitation and subdued regret. He gestured toward her mug, which sat waiting on the counter across from him, inviting her to sit. Aurora hesitated, her eyes shadowed with sorrow. After a brief pause, she stepped forward and slid onto the bar stool. She didn't speak at first, her attention fixed on her mug as if it might hold the words she needed. William remained silent, his gaze steady, waiting for her to begin. Eventually, she lifted her eyes to his, silently willing him to break the silence, but he didn't. "So what happens now?" Aurora ventured, her voice laced with unease. She straightened her posture, realizing she had been slouching. "Now," William replied, his tone calm but firm. "I think we both know it's over." Aurora's breath hitched, and she closed her eyes briefly, exhaling a shaky sigh. "I don't want it to end like this," she said quietly. "I'm sure you don't," William answered. "But after everything you've done, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired." Aurora lowered her gaze back to her mug, holding it in her hands as though its warmth might offer some solace. William had even added her favorite cream, and its scent wafted up to meet her. "It doesn't have to end," she murmured. "I know I've been selfish." William's lips curled into a humorless smile. "That's putting it mildly." He tapped his fingers on his mug, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably before asking, "Do you plan on staying like this?" Aurora blinked, caught off guard. William had never spoken to her so directly, and his tone unsettled her. She began, but he cut her off. "That wasn't a real question," he clarified. "After everything, after—" He gestured vaguely toward the upstairs bedroom. "No, just no." Aurora's mouth tightened. She searched for something to say that might make him understand. "It didn't mean anything," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "It was just physical. I don't feel anything for him." "I disagree," William said flatly, taking another measured sip of his coffee. Aurora reached out across the counter, her hand seeking his, but he recoiled instantly. "Don't," he said sharply, his voice carrying a hard edge. "I don't want you touching me, not with that." He gestured vaguely toward her altered appearance. "Not with what you've become." Aurora froze, her hand retreating as though she had been burned. Pain flashed across her face as she clutched her mug, her wide eyes locked on William. "Why are you saying this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I thought you liked—" "I never should have agreed to any of it," William interrupted, his gaze moving over her with a mixture of anger and sadness. "That's when everything started falling apart." "We did it so I could feel better," Aurora protested. William let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, sure, it started that way. But then came the surgeries, the liposuction, the lifts, the augmentations, the nose jobs. At some point, it wasn't about feeling better anymore. It became something else." Aurora stood abruptly, her bar stool scraping the floor and tipping over. "And what's wrong with that?" she demanded. "I was never attractive before. I was invisible. Plain Aurora, average Aurora. No one noticed me. No one wanted me." Her voice cracked. "So I changed that. I fixed it." William snorted derisively, but Aurora pressed on. "Now I'm desirable. Now men notice me." She jabbed a finger at him. "You just can't handle it. You can't handle being married to this." She gestured at her body, running her hands over her curves as her voice rose. William's expression darkened, his smirk fading. "You think this is about my ego?" he asked, his voice low and firm. "You've turned yourself into someone I don't even know anymore, Aurora. And for what? Attention? Validation? If that's what you wanted, congratulations, you got it. But in the process, you lost me." Aurora lifted her arms gracefully, threading her fingers through her golden locks as her back arched subtly and her hips moved in a calculated rhythm. She had practiced this exact motion endlessly, perfecting it to an art form. "You're insignificant, William," she said, her voice cutting as she adopted another deliberate stance. "You're incapable of understanding who I've become." "You'd rather I remained the old Aurora," she continued, her tone heavy with disdain. "Content with a simple life in our little home, driving an old car, and accepting mediocrity." With every word, she seemed to gain momentum, the balance of power shifting toward her. "Well, that's not who I am anymore. I've had my breasts enhanced, but that's just the beginning." She tilted her head, her expression daring him to challenge her. "I had my waist contoured, and it's already paid off. I got a bonus because of it." She paused for effect, ensuring her next words landed. "I had my nose straightened, and that brought in another client. The better I look, the more doors open for me." Her hands settled firmly on her hips as she locked eyes with William. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. "Men are easy to manipulate," she sneered, her voice dripping with scorn. "You act on impulse, not logic, and I take full advantage of that." Leaning closer, she gestured pointedly. "These breasts? The ones you used to adore? They brought me a $5,000 bonus, and there's more coming." She grabbed a strand of her hair, letting it slide through her fingers. "These extensions? Remember when I used to have black hair? Blondes catch men's eyes, William. Now I'm noticed." With a sharp turn, she showcased her figure. "And this body? Men trip over themselves just to catch a glimpse. This," she said, motioning to herself from head to toe, "got me the regional manager's attention, in the bedroom, and it'll secure my next promotion, too." Her voice climbed in intensity as she declared, "Everything I've done is an investment in myself, in us, in our future. I've learned to exploit how men think because I refuse to be ignored any longer." Her gaze hardened. "If you can't handle that, walk away. If you can, accept it." William's response was calm, almost nonchalant. "Walk away?" he asked, a faint smile playing at his lips. Aurora's frustration flared. "Yes! If you're too weak to handle this, then leave!" she shouted. "Maybe if you come back with a better attitude, I'll consider letting you try again." William's tone remained unshaken. "No," he said simply, lifting his cup and taking a measured sip. Aurora's voice rose in disbelief. "No?" "No," he repeated, his demeanor unwavering. Aurora stormed over to him, leaning in as if her physical presence could intimidate him. "If you're staying, you'd better adapt," she warned. "I won't tolerate your nonsense. If you can't adjust, then leave." William's reply was firm. "No!" Her patience snapped. "You're pathetic," she spat. "This is how it is now. Get used to it." Still, William didn't flinch. He took another sip from his mug, his silence more powerful than any retort. Aurora's frustration boiled over. "Go to hell with your no," she hissed. "You know I'm right. I'm going upstairs to sleep with that man in our bedroom. He'll get me promoted. Another $15,000 a year, more clients, more bonuses." William shook his head slowly, as if tired of the argument. At first her words had wounded him deeply, but now his resolve had solidified. "You can't stop me," Aurora declared, enraged by his defiance. "If you want to stay with me, you'll have to accept this new reality." "Thank you for coming," William began, retrieving his wallet and showing his driver's license to the male officer. "I'm the sole owner of this house. Upstairs there's someone who shouldn't be here, and I'd like help removing this woman from the premises as well," he explained, motioning toward Aurora. "William!" Aurora shouted, storming toward him. "Upstairs?" the female officer asked. "Is the individual armed? What's the situation?" "William, stop! This isn't true!" Aurora's voice rose, her words tinged with panic. William ignored her, retrieving his tablet from the coffee table and powering it on. He pulled up a document and handed it to the male officer. "What's this?" the officer asked, examining the screen before glancing back at William's license. "It's proof that I'm the sole owner of this property," William explained. "The individual upstairs has no right to be here." "All right," the officer said, returning the tablet. "You're the owner. Can you explain the situation?" Aurora's frustration boiled over. "William, what are you doing?" she demanded, her tone oscillating between anger and desperation. "I came home to find my wife in bed with her boss," William stated matter-of-factly. "I told him he needed to leave, but he's still here. I'd like him removed, and I'm prepared to press charges." "William!" Aurora exclaimed, her indignation flaring. The female officer muttered under her breath about the difficulty of domestic disputes. "Officers!" Aurora interjected defiantly. "I invited that person here. He's not trespassing." "Ma'am," the male officer responded evenly, "under city law, if a household member deems someone unwelcome on private property, they must leave immediately or face legal consequences. Did your husband ask this person to leave?" "Yes," William confirmed. "I shouted it from the stairs. I didn't confront him directly because the door was locked, and I wanted to avoid a physical altercation. I have the incident recorded on my phone," he added, tapping his chest pocket. "William," Aurora hissed, her voice low and furious. "And," William continued, "I'd also like her escorted from the premises. I'm not requesting her arrest, just her removal." "Was there any violence?" the female officer asked, looking intently at Aurora. "No," Aurora protested. "I didn't touch him." "I meant, did he harm you?" the officer clarified. Aurora shook her head. Satisfied, the female officer turned to her partner. "Sir, can you show me where the bedroom is?" "Of course," William said, leading the way. The female officer stayed behind, her watchful gaze fixed on Aurora. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "please remain here with me." Aurora stared in stunned silence as her husband and the officer made their way up the stairs. An unsettling sensation churned in her gut, an unshakable sense that something was profoundly amiss, though she couldn't quite put it into words. "This feels wrong," she muttered, her voice wavering. "I understand it might seem that way, ma'am," the officer replied evenly, his tone firm yet detached. 10 minutes later, Aurora's unease morphed into dread as the male officer reappeared at the top of the stairs, his commanding voice cutting through the air. 2 more officers trailed behind him, their movements deliberate and synchronized. As they descended, Aurora's boss came into view. His disheveled appearance was striking. Bare-chested with his hair in disarray, he wore only his dress pants, the waistband buttoned but the belt and fly undone. Fury was etched into his face, his humiliation as plain as the scene unfolding. He fixed Aurora with a seething glare before storming toward the door. Behind him, the officer carried a bundle of discarded clothes, a jacket, shirt, tie, and shoes with socks neatly tucked inside. One hand gripped the garments, while the other secured the man's handcuffed wrists. As they passed, the officer exchanged a brief glance with his partner and nodded subtly. "I'll give her time to gather her things," the female officer said, her voice calm but resolute. Nearby, Aurora's husband, William, stood quietly, observing the drama unfold with an air of grim resolve. "William, don't do this, please," Aurora pleaded, her voice cracking as the weight of the situation sank in. "It's already done," William replied, his tone heavy with finality. "I can't keep living like this. I don't feel safe in my own home anymore." The words hit Aurora like a blow, but William pressed on. "You've been sneaking strangers into our house behind my back. You're not the same person you were, and I can't ignore it any longer. Pack your things. Take whatever you need. The lawyers will handle the rest." He glanced at the officer as if to emphasize his point, even mentioning the recording device tucked in his pocket, ensuring there would be evidence of the proceedings. Aurora reached out in desperation. "William, we can fix this. Don't throw everything away." William's eyes closed briefly, his face drawn with the burden of painful memories. "We've tried, Aurora, for so long, but it's over. We just couldn't make it work." The female officer stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. "Sir, is she allowed to take her belongings now?" "Yes," William said distantly. "Her car is in the garage. Let her take the BMW. The Subaru stays." With a nod, the officer turned to Aurora. "Let's gather your things," she said gently. In a daze, Aurora followed her upstairs, barely registering the exchange around her. While she was occupied, William pulled out his phone and stopped the recording. He ensured the file was uploaded securely and shared it with his lawyer, his family, and even Aurora's relatives. His actions were precise and calculated, though his lawyer had advised him not to inform Aurora's employer yet, preserving her position in case her income became necessary during the divorce proceedings. Aurora came back downstairs, her face pale and her eyes wide with disbelief. "William, we can still fix this. We can work through it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. William's expression remained unchanged. "I've already tried. I begged you to stop, to understand what you were doing to us. At first you listened, then you stopped. And after the company party a few weeks ago, after I saw you with him, I stopped trying too." Tears streamed down Aurora's face as she murmured, "That's not how I remember it." William let out a weary sigh. "Do you even know how many times I've said this? It's over, Aurora." The female officer reappeared, holding one of Aurora's suitcases. "Let's go," she said softly but firmly. Aurora grabbed the remaining bags, her movements mechanical, and followed the officer to the garage. The sound of the garage door opening, the BMW's engine roaring to life, and the door shutting again felt like a curtain closing on their shared life. William stood frozen in place, the tension in his body finally beginning to release. He sank onto the couch, his head falling into his hands. A solitary sob escaped him as the enormity of the moment set in. Across the room, the coffee he had poured earlier remained untouched on the counter, now cold and forgotten. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.